Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. I'm Lorcan Doherty and today we're talking about the local elections. On Sunday 28th of May, Catalonia goes to the polls. In almost 1,000 different municipalities, voters will choose the new makeup of their city and town councils and ultimately their new mayor. On today's podcast, we're going to be looking at some of the most hotly contested councils, including an unprecedented 4-horse race for mayor in Barcelona. And we're going to try and explain for you some of the nuances of the local elections here, some of the issues on the line, things to look out for on election night, and what might constitute a successful election for the various parties. And there are a lot of parties. Joining me today are Cristina Tomàs White and Guifré Jordan. Hello, both of you.
Hey, Lorcan.
Hi, Lorcan.
Good to see you. Last week we were talking about the boss, Bruce Springsteen. This week we're talking about municipal elections. Really get everything on Filling the Sink, don't you? And I was thinking of the Venn diagram of these two topics, and when I think of people in it, Guifré, you're right there in the centre.
Yep.
Yeah, although
Politics
I didn't go to
Springsteen.
Yeah, but I wasn't involved in the Bruce Springsteen podcast, so yeah, at least I got the elections, which is
Behind the scenes, though.
yeah, a little bit behind the scenes, I have to say. Yeah,
Always. Well, I'm very excited about these elections. I do love a good election, but also because I'm going to be voting here for the first time. So my first question is, what do I do? Because I believe that, you don't get a little pencil as you go in. I'm used to marking an X on a bit of paper or maybe even a 1, 2, 3, putting candidates in order, but none of that, no?
Nope. So you'll go to usually it's at a school, and you'll have a stack of papers, different lists, different political parties' lists and envelopes, and that's all you got to do. You have to pick
I pick the one I like?
Yep, put it in an envelope and hand it in.
Okay.
don't put two different candidacies in the same envelope
Just
because
pick one.
it'll be void.
Okay. And you're not voting for a particular person, you're voting for a party list.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So unlike in general elections or Catalan elections, in the local elections, people like myself, some foreigners are able to vote.
Right. So if you're from the EU or a list of 13 different countries, I can't really remember them off the top of my head, but there's some in South America.
We did a podcast
check
on
out
it
the podcast.
before, like when we were getting people to register.
And my personal annoyance here is that there's 17 people from Trinidad and Tobago that live in Catalonia who have the right to vote, and none of them have registered.
Not one. It's probably a handful
if you're
of
listening
families.
to us, please register.
Maybe
I mean,
all
it's
of
too
them
late
are
now.
under 18. Maybe all of them. That'd be a bit
All unaccompanied minors.
all of them. We're not sure.
So the election campaign is already underway. We're going to get into lots of nitty-gritty about different councils. But first, maybe just what's the big picture here?
It's kind of hard to talk about such a big picture when each town, each municipality will have its own local issues that people are running on. One thing that you will see in local elections is that people don't necessarily vote for the same party as they would in the Catalan or the Spanish elections.
Exactly. You would vote more for the person, so if you know one of the candidates, because it's your neighbor.
Even though you're voting for the party, the candidate does hold a huge sway
much
there.
higher influence. And other general topics or national scale topics like the independence debate or others don't come that often in the local election discussions, so it'd be more rather, street cleaning, public safety, and some of these issues. These are the top talking points of each local election.
Well, you mentioned public safety and actually local councils. I mean, there's 947 municipalities. And so that's 947 very different elections going on. And a lot of individual councils as well have power over a local police force. So, so things like that, how the budget goes on schools and in the council, facilities, cycle lanes and stuff. And
green areas, stuff like this.
Super blocks in Barcelona, huge issue.
Exactly. However, you could see some general trend, like in the inland Catalonia, it'd be like the pro-independence parties would get more votes. Maybe the other parties don't even run in some towns. Whereas in the Barcelona area, the trend is different. Maybe you would get more socialist party, left-wing forces, not necessarily pro-independence. So, yeah, you can see.
Though even in the inland, like Esquerra is left-wing, it's pro-independence, but it's left-wing. So it's not to say that they're all right-wing.
No, definitely not. But it's going to be interesting to see which party gets more mayoral posts and more councillors, but this doesn't mean they will be the most voted, necessarily.
So last time out, for example, Esquerra Republicana, so left-wing pro-independence party, they won the most votes. They had the most councillors, but actually Junts per Catalunya, which is a pro-independence party, more kind of centrist, a kind of a broad church, pro-business party, they actually had more mayors. So it doesn't always correlate. And the third biggest party in terms of vote, you've mentioned them already, Guifré, is the Socialists as well, who do very well in the bigger cities. Lots of tight races. And then we also have a lot of complicated deals being done after the election because there's so many parties. We've mentioned the three main ones, but there's lots of smaller parties too. It's quite rare that parties win an overall majority.
Yeah, it's very strange that party get an absolute majority, especially in bigger towns, bigger areas. So there's a lot of fragmentation of vote. However, in order not to get like 27 councillors from 27 parties, different parties, the electoral law says that there is a 5% threshold in order to get councillors. So if your party would deserve a councillor because the proportion says, okay, you should have a councillor, but you get less than 5% of the votes, you don't get any. This is just in order to avoid too much unworkable fragmentation of vote.
And some of the parties that might be looking very closely at that 5%, for example, far-right Vox in some council areas, Ciudadanos, the Citizens Party, who have in the past been quite a big force, maybe especially not in local elections as much, but in general elections or Catalan elections, but have fallen away in the last few years.
Even the People's Party got 5.1% in the last Barcelona election, meaning that, for thanks to a handful of votes, they got their two councillors.
It's great. And People's Party, of course, the main opposition party in Spain, and there are local elections happening all across Spain, and also regional elections.
Not in Catalonia.
Yeah, in some parts of Spain.
In some parts of Spain. And quite a contrast. PP, for example, just about scraping it in Barcelona if you compare it to Madrid, for example, where they're flying high in the polls.
So we do have exceptions about that we'll hear about later on.
Yeah, you'll have to wait.
Very exciting coming up. Stay tuned. But first, we are going to hear a little bit more about Barcelona. It is, of course, by far the biggest council area in Catalonia and holds a lot of sway because of that. Ada Colau, the city's first female mayor, came to power in 2015, just about managed to retain the post in the last elections in 2019. And this year, it's shaping up to be very tight again.
Barcelona's more than 1.6 million inhabitants could soon see more efforts to regulate cruises. A tram that goes from one end of the city to the other for the first time in 50 years. Attempts to create more affordable housing. Many questions emerge for the city's future after the local elections on May 28th. According to the latest poll, there are four main contenders, each with a very different vision for the Catalan capital. It looks like a close race, with Colau narrowly leading socialist Jaume Collboni, the Junts-backed candidate Xavier Trias, and Ernest Maragall of Esquerra fourth. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact on the city's tourism industry, and while some look forward to it going back to what it used to be before the health emergency, others, including but not only current Mayor Colau, have very different views. Only last year, over 19 million tourists visited Barcelona.
Hem d'acceptar que la nostra economia depengui del turisme? Rotundament no.
Should we accept that our economy depends on tourism? Esquerra's Ernest Maragall asked at a recent event. Not at all. We need to regulate tourism. According to him, we have lots of tools to do so. We are not a low-cost city, or at least we do not want to be one.
No som una ciutat low cost, no? O no volem ser-ho, millor dit.
The question of tourism has been very present over the last mandate, especially with the potential Barcelona airport expansion that was rejected because of environmental concerns. Now, candidates like Xavier Trias, who is backed by Junts, have suggested that the expansion should be a part of the city's future.
Ningú vol una agressió sobre la Ricarda.
No one wants the airport to have an impact on the La Ricarda Lagoon Nature Reserve area, he said. But, he argued, everyone wants an agreement so we can have international flights that are as compatible as possible with having a sustainable airport that works.
Que estigui d'acord amb el medi ambient I que funcioni.
Transport in Barcelona is not only about planes, but also about mobility within the city. Whoever is in power next term will have to decide if there will be a tram that ends up crossing Barcelona's center again.
Reforçant aquesta idea de que el que hem de fer és oferir alternatives a la ciutadania.
Current Mayor Ada Colau of anti-austerity Barcelona en Comú believes that this is essential as, quote, "What we need to do is offer residents more compatible and efficient alternatives to private transport." This, she argues, will get thousands of cars out of the city center and make Barcelona a healthier city to live in.
Més sostenible.
More tourism, of course, means more tourist apartments, which can end up pricing long-term residents out. The City Council has focused a lot of its policies on affordable housing over the past 4 years, but some, including former Deputy Mayor Jaume Collboni of the junior coalition partner Socialists, don't consider it to be enough.
M'agradaria sentir més parlar d'habitatge.
I would like to hear more about housing and proposals to improve housing policies rather than Ada Colau's talk about superblocks, he said recently. How are the candidates proposing to improve access to housing for younger people and for them to stay in the city? A lot of issues, a lot of candidates, and a lot at stake on May 28th.
So it's all up for grabs in Barcelona. And, if you look at the numbers needed, parties need 21 seats to get an absolute majority. And last time round, no single party won more than 10, which is obviously less than half. So that, it's like...
That means at least 3 parties to get an absolute majority.
Yeah.
That's quite difficult.
So even on election night, we won't have the whole picture. There'll be a bit of negotiating to come afterwards.
Definitely not. In Barcelona, we've never gotten an absolute majority in the 40 years of local elections after Franco died. So
it never happened.
Never happened.
At least we have polls for Barcelona, but because every council is different, it's impossible to get polls for all the other places we're going to talk about. So there's a few more big polls to come up until I think the 22nd of May. And then there has to be like a period of silence in terms of polling in the last few days before the election.
Unless your media outlet has some delegation in Andorra, this country near bordering Catalonia, this microstate. So in this case, for instance, it's very typical that El Periódico newspaper from Catalonia, they've got a delegation in Andorra called El Periòdic d'Andorra. It's basically them, but based in Andorra. And from the 22nd, or from the last week before the election, they would every day publish a poll.
Really? So everyone tuning in to see the absolute latest polls there?
Absolutely.
A bit of a workaround. Let's talk about some of the areas outside Barcelona then, but not going too far. We're going to talk about the Red Belt, which is like this area encircling Barcelona, which is a socialist stronghold and has been for decades.
Yeah, it has been since the first elections in 1979 when Franco died. And part of this has to do because it's a very working, or at least traditionally, it was a very working class area of the people who lived in the outskirts of Barcelona.
Industrial area.
Very industrial. These are the children or grandchildren of migrant workers who came from southern Spain in the 50s and 60s. So this explains their left, why they lean left, but also why they're unionist.
Exactly. Some of this community would also lean towards comuns, towards this left to the Socialist Party, but not really for independence.
Yeah,
former communists, former Green Party, this
patches.
Ada Colau's party, of course. And, we're talking about really big cities. You might not have heard of them if you're not living in Catalonia, but like L'Hospitalet is the second biggest in terms of population city in Catalonia. It's right beside Barcelona. And Cornellà, Sant Joan d'Espí, these are, big population centres. And as we said, a place where socialists tend to do very well. Esquerra are often coming in second or as the main challenger.
In past election, at least, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see in Santa Coloma, so right next to Barcelona, Gabriel Rufián, who is one of the main Esquerra MPs in Madrid. He's actually running in the local election here.
It's his hometown.
In his hometown. But last time the party came in fourth, so, we'll really have to wait and see how well he does.
In some of these towns, what is really at stake is the socialist absolute majority. It is fairly clear that in most of these Red Belt towns, the socialists will win again. But we will see if they'll need someone in order to, garner an absolute majority, or the other parties, including Esquerra, maybe Vox, can prevent the socialist absolute majority.
Badalona was part of this Red Belt until 2011. Badalona, just north of Barcelona, a place, where you're from, Guifré.
Exactly.
And but it's got kind of a unique situation, doesn't it?
Well, we could say that it is like the blue buckle of this red belt, let's say, kind of thing. Because, for many, many years, Badalona was, governed by the socialists, at the beginning by the communists. But, some charismatic figure appeared, searched Xavier García Albiol for the conservatives, for the People's Party, right-wing party.
Which is very rare here in Catalonia because if you look at the map, they're only in power, right now they're only in power in Puntons, which is like some tiny little village.
And Badalona, on the other hand, fourth biggest city in Catalonia. So to have the People's Party, who struggle, they're looking to make that 5% in Barcelona, for example, to have them in the very next city over as the party with the mayor is quite unbelievable. And it shows, I suppose, how local elections can vary so much.
Because in Badalona, in all the other elections, the People's Party is doing really bad, let's say, or it hardly gets 5, 6, 7%. But in the last local elections in Badalona, it got 37%, and it is all down to this figure, this charismatic figure, García Albiol, who's like using his techniques to get voters that are not conservative, and he's succeeding.
Terrassa is another major city where the candidate seems to be more important than the party.
Right, though in this case, we're talking about a former socialist, so Jordi Bayat, so he has very, very different politics from Albiol in Badalona. But yes, he was the socialist mayor, but then he stepped down in 2017 after the Catalan independence referendum and created his own party, Tot per Terrassa, because he was against the socialist stance on direct rule following the referendum. And even though he's not openly pro-independence, he says that he's not openly pro-union either. So he says that that the city is his main focus.
So we haven't really talked about Junts much, and we did say towards the start that they actually have more mayors in Catalonia than any other party. So where are their strongholds?
Yeah, basically, so in inland Catalonia, outside the metropolitan area, that's where Junts is especially strong. For instance, in the Girona area, in little towns, and in some county capitals in the inland, for instance, in Vic, in Igualada, in Banyoles, in Valls. They came first in all these towns, and they will rival with Esquerra in order to repeat as top force. It's usually this battle. Interesting to see, for instance, in Igualada, what will happen. Esquerra is running with the former health minister, Alba Vergés.
Very well-known figure here because she was in post during the pandemic.
Exactly, and we will see whether battle will be even tighter than usual there.
So it's very much in this inland Catalonia, all these smaller cities and towns, a battle within the pro-independence camp, isn't it, between Esquerra and Junts? And, for example, Vic, you mentioned, 20 out of the 21 councillors there are pro-independence parties. Or Berga, 16 out of 17. And, in fact, CUP are the biggest party there, which I don't think we've mentioned CUP so far. So tell us about CUP.
Yes, far-left pro-independence. They haven't managed to enter the Barcelona council just yet, but they're a bit hopeful in this department.
They are stronger also in inland Catalonia than in the metropolitan areas. CUP being very municipalist, if this
all about
word
kind of local government.
But then in Badalona, they could make or break an election.
Exactly, yeah. But in any case, it's true that in some towns, pro-independence parties are like 16 out of 17 councillors, but this doesn't mean that they cooperate. There is within the pro-independence factions, there are different ways of thinking, and one party in government, the other in opposition most of the times.
Which, if you've been following politics on Catalan news, this will not come as a surprise.
No, definitely not.
Okay, so we've talked about the Barcelona and the metropolitan area. We've talked about more rural, maybe inland Catalonia. We haven't talked about some of the other bigger cities further away from Barcelona. Girona, for example, Cristina, which would be very pro-independence as well.
Right. So their Junts and their predecessors have been in power since 2011, which is when everyone will know his name, Carles Puigdemont, so the former Catalan president, the one who was in power during the referendum. He became mayor in 2011. Before that, the socialists had actually been in power for over 3 decades.
So it's kind of a bit of a free-for-all. You've got Junts, socialists, anything goes.
Right. Though in the last election, the socialists were actually the third party, but they had more votes than Esquerra too, which is very big in other pro-independence areas. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now, especially as the mayor, Marta Madrenes, the Junts mayor, is stepping down, or she's not stepping down, but she's not up for re-election. And the new candidate for the party is the former Catalan Research and Universities Minister, Gemma Jace. So
a well-known figure.
Right, relatively well-known, but will she be able to retain the popularity that
not in
Madrenas?
Local politics. You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah, not in local politics, I'd say. So Madrenas obviously is much more well-known in Girona, let's say. Probably she was the mayor.
Yeah, though she was an MP at the time,
yes,
too.
that's
in
correct.
Barcelona.
Yeah. So we will see whether, for instance, in cases like Girona, Junts, for instance, wins, but Esquerra, CUP, and the Socialists
And Guanyem.
create
Exactly.
CUP, which is called Guanyem Girona. They might make an alliance with Esquerra and the Socialists to oust Junts. So, yeah.
Other cities that are of interest and more really tight battles as well are Lleida and Tarragona.
Well, and it was insane 4
Very
years
close,
ago. I mean,
very
it was
close.
super close.
81 votes in the end in Lleida last time round.
Yeah, for Esquerra.
Over the socialists, yeah.
Exactly, over the socialists. So this is one of the main reasons why Esquerra was able to govern for 4 years for the first time in Lleida.
In 30 years, the socialists had been in power for a really long time there.
Exactly. So we will see, they governed with Junts and with Comuns, which is like antagonists, Junts and Comuns, and they were governing together.
Like the Comuns left the coalition.
Exactly, and it was a bit unworkable. But, you get to see these weird alliances. So we will see who gets first, both in Lleida and also in Tarragona. Because in Tarragona, it was super tight to 4 years ago with Esquerra losing to the socialists by a handful of votes too. But in the end, garnering an absolute majority and ensuring their very first mayoral post in Tarragona.
But also, like in the other two cities, the socialists had been in power for a really long time, even more so in Tarragona. This was the first time they didn't have a socialist mayor in 40 years.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch those trends. And I guess until election night, we won't really know because, as we said, there hasn't been really any polling apart from for Barcelona. And we will find out a lot on the night because, unlike in some other places, the results come in thick and fast, don't they? So voting is from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. We'll get an exit poll at 8 p.m. But we'll already know the final results by around, 11 p.m., we reckon?
Yeah, even before 11.
Even before 11.
Yeah.
So check out catalannews.com for full coverage on the day of the elections.
The day of the election, we will have so much coverage. We already do have a lot of articles up on catalannews.com, articles and videos covering all the issues that we've talked about today and more. So do check that out. And we will have a special episode of Filling the Sink on Monday, the 29th of May. So that's the day after the election where we'll probably be a little bit sleep deprived, but we'll do our best to
no sleep for the elections. Come on, that's so fun. Why wasting time sleeping that night? No.
So we'll do our best to get a podcast out to you on Monday, 29th of May, to tell you everything that's happened. Time now for our Catalan phrase. What's it this week, Cristina?
Està com gat i gos.
Está com gat y gos, to be like cat and dog.
Yeah, like cats and dogs.
Like cats and dogs, which means nothing to do with raining. Cats and
to
dogs.
be fighting, to be arguing. Like, you don't say that?
In English? I don't.
I do.
Cats, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure.
There's an ocean between you and you. That might be the reason.
It's more American English. I don't know. To be
You never
added.
saw the movie?
The cats and dogs.
Like cats and dogs, something like that.
I'll have to check it out.
We've got to research that.
Estar com gat y gos. That's us for today. Thank you very much for joining me, Guifré and Cristina.
Pleasure, Lorcan.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much to you for listening. We're back again next Saturday with another episode of Filling the Sink. Until then, from me, Lorcan Doherty, and all of us here at Catalan News, bye for now. Adeu.